Welcome back and thanks a lot for staying with us, everyone. Tonight, our attention is shifting to global issues from the just concluded presidential elections in Ghana to Burkina Faso, where Rintaba John Wenogo, Communications Minister and spokesperson for the previous government, has been named as the country's new premier, a day after military leader Ibrahim Traoré dissolved the government without providing any reason. Also tonight, we will be dissecting Syria's civil war, as Syrian rebel forces have taken over Damascus in a lightning offensive, and President Bashar al-Assad has fled the country. As U.S. President Joe Biden says, fall of Assad government is act of justice. For wider perspectives of these global issues, let's speak with Ambassador Elijah Yagwa, former Nigerian ambassador to Burundi, who joins us from our Abuja studio. Ambassador, good evening to you, sir. Thank you very much for joining us on Politics Tonight. Thank you.
A very good evening to you, and thanks for having me.
Right, so let's start with the just concluded presidential election in Ghana, where former President Dramani Mahama has been declared winner. So while the final result of the election is not yet available, you know, that election generated attention from across the globe, considering the pedigree of the contestants, especially the major frontliners. We had Vice President Mahamudu Bawumia and former President John Dramani Mahama, both from the historically disadvantaged northern parts of the country. So first, what is your impression of that election? How do you evaluate the process and outcome?
Thank you so very much. As an observer in that election, I feel that a lot of credit needs to be given to Africa. Particularly the West African countries and the way and manner elections have been conducted lately. And Ghana's election, a couple of issues. Historically, there hasn't been any party since 1992 that has been in power in Ghana for more than 8 years. And if you remember, this president-elect, President John Mahama Dramani, actually lost election about 8 years ago. His party, NDC, lost election to the current ruling party in Ghana, the NPP. And coming into this election, this is also the first time that there hasn't been an Ashanti, which is actually more in population, an Ashanti person running for elections. And two of them, the two candidates, actually are from the northern part of Ghana. And what was instructive in this election is that the ruling party presented the current serving vice president as its candidate, whereas the leader and the frontrunner in opposition, the NDC is the opposition party. And they had come into the election with various important issues. Number one was the issue of the economy. Number two was the issue of unemployment. Number three was the issue of, illegal mining. And Ghana has a population of about 34 million, out of which 18.7 million registered in the course of the elections. And they were actually expecting at least 70 or between 60 to 70% turnout in the elections. And a very significant number of those that registered for the elections, say between the ages of 18 and 54, about 70% of the voting population are between the ages of 18 and 54. So that meant that the young people played a very important role in these elections. And it was a very important elections for the people of Ghana. And when we got there to observe the elections, we received briefings from the ECOWAS, the Economic Community of West African States, from Commonwealth and from the African Union, and several other observer groups looking at what the issues for the elections were in Ghana. And it's instructive to note that this election came and there was actually no tension. If you actually flew into Ghana and you entered into Ghana, you wouldn't even know that there's a conversation around the elections that was going on. So one important element in the elections was the fact that in Ghana, their presidential election, actually they run elections every 4 years, the presidential and parliamentary elections. They have about 276 parliament seats that they were also running for in these elections. And the major candidates in the elections were two of them, the NDC candidates, that's the opposition party, and the NPP, which is the ruling party. But then again, there were 13 candidates that were running for the elections, out of which 4 were independent candidates. So their constitution or their electoral guidelines allows for independent candidates to run for presidential elections. They also had 2 women that were running for the elections as well. And of course, one unfortunately died before the elections. But generally, it was a peaceful elections, and a few issues, of note. Number one is that Ghana prepared for early voting. And what does that mean? On Monday last week, there was just a week today, there was early voting that allowed people that were on essential duties, the security people, the doctors, the media people, to be able to go and cast their votes. So you see a situation whereby people that should ordinarily vote are disenfranchised, like the case we have in every other place. But what has happened in Ghana is that they now have early voting arrangements where these people were allowed to go and cast their votes so that on an election day they can go about their normal duties. The media people can continue with their coverage. The people that are supposed to be at the hospitals and some other people will have, avenue to continue with their duties. Since the elections, in any case, it's not a day where you restrict movements. Moving around Accra, because we covered the greater Accra region, meaning that we had to go to constituencies that were 1 hour, 45 minutes, away from the central, the capital territory, Accra. In our movement to that place, we noticed that there were free movements, businesses were open, and people walked in freely into the voting areas and did cast their vote without any issues. So
also,
that is also a very important issue, yes.
The North also determined the winner for the very first time. How fundamental does that appear to you? Is that like a power shift?
No, what has happened, coming into the elections, like I said, the current vice president campaigned on the slogan he referred to as an upgrade, whereas the president-elect right now campaigned on the slogan of shifts, reset, having to reset, because it's now 8 years, so they wanted the Ghanaian people to vote according to what they have always had for the past, the number of years since 1992 that they've been, having democratically elected governments in their country. So it was a case of the people of Ghana saying they needed a change. They didn't like what was going on in the economy, and quite a lot of people actually came out to vote in these elections. And it's important to understand that there was actually no place where you could find, where we observed any issue like violence in the course of the elections. Even though in the news, when we listened to the news, we heard that there were places around the border region between Togo and Ghana where they lost lives and all of that. But that actually I think it's not something that we witnessed in most of the places that the observers covered, But it was a peaceful elections. It's also important to note that when I looked through their ballot papers, they had the picture and the name of the candidates running the elections on the ballot paper. They had the name and the picture of the candidate, they had the logo of the party, and they now have where you could thumbprint. Another notable feature was that their ballot boxes were sealed. You cannot open the ballot boxes except if it is 5 o'clock in the evening. And it's also important to state that materials, or what we refer to as sensitive materials, were at the stations, polling stations, early enough. We were, at the first polling station where we observed the elections at 5 minutes to 7 a.m. in the morning. At exactly 7 a.m. in the morning, voting started, and the voting process was simple. You come in with your card, you get accredited by their what they call BVD, the biometric verifying device. It verifies you. You go and take the first, they give you the first presidential election ballot paper. You go and cast your vote. You come back and collect the parliamentary one. You also go and cast your vote. And then that is what happened. And all of these processes happen in the presence of party agents. And then at the end of the day, we also went back to observe the fact that once it was 5 p.m. in the evening, all the party agents came together. The staffers of the Electoral Commission used scissors to be able to break off the seals that was covering the ballot boxes, and they brought them out, opened them. In fact, they will ensure that each of the ballot papers is stamped, just like we have here in Nigeria. So this process is similar to what we have, but what I find very interesting here is that there were no people, voters were not coming very close to cluster around where the officials were. They had a line which was actually very far from where people were casting their votes. And they also provided for people with disabilities and the aged. They provided seats for people to come and sit down and cast their votes. And in my estimation, there were about 35 to 40% female participation across the areas that we monitored in the course of the elections. And it's very important because these elections, happened, and counting processes were going on through the night. So at about 9 o'clock in the morning, there was a news flash that the Vice President will have to address the nation. And at about exactly 9:35, the Vice President came in. At the time, it was about 12 parliamentary positions that the result had been declared out of 276. And it was about less than 1 million results has come in for the presidential election out of about 10 to 11 million voters that they were expecting to publish, to participate in the elections. And the Vice President announced that he has worked with his team all through the night. They have seen the figures at the back end, and that he can see that the former president, John Dramani, won the elections, and that he had called him previously to congratulate him on the election and to offer him his support for the transition process, and that he wanted the people of the world, the international community, the investors, to know that Ghana is peaceful and that, Ghana is actually above any individual interest. And that was quite a very interesting, a very interesting scenario. And he made it very clear that he was making the speech to be able to bring down the tension in the country so that people, even before the Electoral Commission goes ahead to announce their results, let things begin to go as normal in the country. So I felt it was quite, a big step in the right direction for Ghana in the course of the elections.
Right, so Ambassador, any direct lesson for Nigeria, especially because, rarely in Ghana do you see people moving from one party to another with every general election? How important is that for a nation's political stability? So whether the party is in power or opposition, they stick to the political party. Is this something Nigerian politicians must begin to emulate?
No, I think we need to start emulating that process. We need to, first of all, our INEC laws needs to begin to look at how we can begin to have early voting so that, people that are on essential duties. For example, if I ask you, Olajumoke, if you have a voter's card, yes, you may have a voter's card, but you find out that on an election day, you will be you'll be somewhere, trying to, provide coverage for your media house. So technically, a lot of people in the media are disenfranchised from casting their votes. Why should that be the case? Electoral law must be able to arrange for early voting so that people, doctors, nurses, there are quite a lot of people that are busy on election day that we are disenfranchising. So I think this is a very important process in our electoral reform. We need to plan for that because if Ghana can do it, we can also do it as Nigerians. Secondly, I also believe that we can find a way where we can begin to have the names and the pictures of the people that are running for elections reflect on the ballot papers. So that if voters are unable to identify the parties they want to vote for as a result of just the logo and all of that, they can actually look at the faces of the people that are contesting the elections, look at their names, and by so doing, they can easily identify, people that they want to vote for, and they can easily cast their votes for them. And I believe that these are basic lessons I believe that we can learn. And it's also important for us to not to treat every election as though it's a war or as though we are fighting. It's important for us to, understand that if you come out to run for elections and you do not win at the end of the day, you can go home and let the person that has been chosen, get to do the work than litigations. What we have here is that we litigate through all tribunals to the appeal court and in some cases the Supreme Court. And we litigate presidential elections, governorship elections, National Assembly elections, State House of Assembly election, even at local government and, whatever, even at councillorship level. There are court cases that are flying up and down. So we need to find a way to accept the decision of the people. And I understand that because, fair enough, it's difficult if you think that you have been rigged in the election, if you think that the processes are not as transparent as they should be. So I also understand that. But again, the umpires in the election must also do everything possible to provide a transparent election in such a way that if people lose the elections, they will have no reason resorting to, using litigations to be able to fight their case out. So what we witnessed in Ghana is a very smooth process that the next morning after the elections took place, the ruling party's candidates came out and conceded defeat to the opposition party. And by so doing, tensions were calm in the country, and every business was going on went on as though nothing happened. So this is very important that we begin to look at our elections as a process that comes in every 4 years, and that if you try your luck this time and you're unable to succeed, there's an opportunity for you to try again. And we don't need to waste blood. We don't need to hire thugs to start killing ourselves on the account of elections. So these are
absolutely.
The lessons.
And we also saw how this election highlighted the adoption of a decentralized system, allowing constituency-level officers to announce parliamentary results locally, while only presidential results are sent to Accra. Do we operate anything similar to this, or we should begin to consider this as we navigate our way towards achieving electoral integrity?
No, that's actually what happened in the case. What happens in the case here in Nigeria? Because if you were, for example, on the day of presidential elections, that elections happens at the same time with our National Assembly elections. So if you get to the constituency, both the Senate and the presidential collation continues. So when you get to the Senate level, only the presidential election continues to the state level. So that's basically how it is done. The difference here in Ghana is that they just have one parliament and they have a presidential elections. And after the vote in the constituency at that level announces their results. But only the presidential election collation goes to the regional level. And every region in this case have got a fax machine that they use to fax their results to the National Collation Center. So the National Collation Center, I'm sure even right now, collation is still going on because they haven't announced the presidential results just yet. And they said that the only reason why they will announce the results is if the 16 regions in Ghana has fully collated and faxed in their results through their fax machines. So this is the situation right now, and this is also what we do here in Nigeria, because usually what you find is that once results are you sort out the result at local government level, the result actually moves to the state, and from the state, once collation is done at the state level, that result actually comes to the National Collation Center. So the process is a bit similar. The only thing that we need to add here is that politicians need to be patient. They need to understand that voting shouldn't come with a lot of rancor. And again, let me also make this point. People that also lost out in the elections are not demonstrating. They are not anywhere, creating chaos in the city. The person that ran for the election had accepted defeat. So it just simply meant that his followers will go ahead with their normal business, because once the leader has accepted defeat, clearly what it means is that there is no need to raise the tension in the country. Quite unlike what we have in some other places like that, once the leader hasn't accepted defeat, then clearly the followers are trying to still, are still moving on as though there is, there is still hope in the course of the election. So I think that a lot of progress has been made by the West African country, and I believe that we are also moving in the right direction.
Absolutely. Ambassador, let's move